Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the musician, writer, singer and guitarist Paul Haig, who was in Josef K in the early 80s and then went on to have a prolific solo career. So this is the interview. And also to say there is a book that's just come out on Josef K that's been written by Johnny Johnson. The interview, this one, yes, it's via mobile phones. There was a little bit of an issue to do with connection, receptions and all that kind of malarkey. And midway through it does stop, but don't worry, it starts again. Quality-wise, it's fine. It gets better, actually. But so, yes, after several minutes of interest and casual chat, talking about all sorts of things, including Taylor Swift and her cats and various other people's cats, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Paul, it's over to you.
Not really. My father had a business partner, and his son was a musician. So I do remember sometimes going around to their house when I was very small, and I was always looking at the guitars and piano, and I didn't really do anything. I just seemed to I seemed to be attracted to them. And I think my dad had noticed that, because he bought me my first guitar when I was about 11 or 12. So.
Right, so that was quite interesting.
My mother could definitely sing. She used to sing around the house. But none of them played an instrument, and they weren't heavily into music or anything, but they could hold tunes. So I did hear singing, but I don't know where it really came from. Listening to the radio, I started hearing things like really concentrating. Even at a young age, I was listening to like the guitars and the drums, and then I was working out lyrics. I just was drawn to it. I can't explain why. It seemed to be something. It seemed to be like home. It seemed to be like natural.
Yes. Well, that's interesting, because I suppose, though I mentioned my love of glam rock, I do remember probably the first song that I got very excited by was Cilla Black on the Cilla Show doing Step Inside Love, and that particular track I sort of found very exciting, and I must have been, about 6 or 7 at the time. I wasn't that sort of old, but there was something about the dynamicness of that song which used to be very kind of exciting when you'd hear it on a Saturday evening.
Well, since you mentioned that, I mean, I would have been, a couple of years older, but I've seen the same stuff, and I'd forgotten that. All that was an influence on me as well. Cilla Black, she had some great singles and stuff in the 60s and early 70s. I mean, some people forget how huge she was. I mean, she was massive.
Yes.
And a fantastic singer. And then, you had all the other music programs. So, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was just popping out, and then, seeing Top of the Pops for the first time and all that. And then, glam rock. I think glam rock was the big change.
Yes.
That was massive.
It was the anthems. But did you used to sort of, when you were at home, in the kitchen, was Radio 2 on? Did you used to have those sort of songs from sort of Burt Bacharach and the Carpenters play and sort of tunes like that? Because I always feel that the other band that had a massive influence on my life was the Carpenters, and the lyrical content of their music, which I just thought was exquisite. And there was those things like Jimmy Young in the Afternoon with him. With What's the Recipe Today, Jimmy, and I suppose all those things have a strange kind of effect on my life. And I remember decades later seeing Burt Bacharach with Elvis Costello when they did that collaboration together on an album, which was just kind of exquisite. So I just wondered if those sort of songs were also started to permeate your brain.
Definitely, I listened to that too, and I was. My parents would sometimes buy some music for pleasure and albums. They didn't know what they were buying, but I'd listen to some of the stuff. They got Sergio Mendes in Brazil '66, Tom Jones, Sinatra. So I was getting all that stuff as well. But also I would be up quite late under my typical cliche under my bed covers with Radio Luxembourg or a tiny little crackly little radio, listening to stuff from the Radio Luxembourg. That would be a big thing as well.
Yes, that was always interesting. And what was the kind of the particular glam world that you kind of resonated with you at that stage?
Well, there was a boy along the road who's maybe 2 years older than me. He had grown-up records. And sometimes I would be buying LPs of them. So I got like Space Oddity and The Man Who Sold the World before Ziggy was out. So I was quite up with Bowie before he broke through with Starman, really. So I was listening to it even then, but when he sort of really went full on glam, and along with Bart Bowen and everything, that's when it became massively exciting. And it wasn't just him. I mean, there was the Sweets had great singles. The Slade were amazing. It was just really an amazing, exciting time. It was like fun to buy a 7-inch record because you never knew you'd get the B-side, and you play it to death.
Yes, absolutely. And when you got to 15 in 1975, and did you...
This actually sounds so old.
I know, God, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Suddenly thinking that was nearly 50 years ago. Yeah. Did you, at that stage, were you looking to leave school, or did you stay on for sort of college or sixth form or anything like that?
No, I was looking to leave. I really didn't like being at school anymore, and I left before I was actually 16. Just before, I heard they'd passed something in the law where you could actually leave if you finished your O levels, and you could just leave if you wanted. So I just went along to the headmaster and asked to leave, and that afternoon I was out. So I really didn't want to be at school anymore. So wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I had been playing guitar for a few years at that point, so I was probably hoping that something would happen musically, but I didn't have any concrete plans or anything.
Yes. And then what was your first gig that you went to at this stage?
It was a really rubbish one. It was just it was a Radio 4 radio concert night at some venue in Edinburgh, and me and Ron, who is the drummer in Josef K, we were neighbours, so we went along to this thing. We would have been about 14 or 15, and there was just a band playing, doing covers, and they just had like long woolen, not like coats, but sort of I don't know what you call them. They were just like light wearing woolen frocks or something, but they were like denim coats, but wool. And they were just playing some covers, and that was the first kind of grown up sort of band we'd ever seen. But then after that, I must admit, we did see a couple of rock bands, like AC/DC and things, and then Queen and stuff like that.
Yes, because that's quite, that's... So you saw AC/DC in the early years?
Yeah, I certainly did. This was all before punk saved my life, So, yeah.
Well, no, it's quite interesting because recently I loved the Sky Arts channel, which is now free, and there was a documentary on AC/DC, and they weren't one of those bands I particularly like, but I'm always interested in a rock documentary, and I didn't realise how committed and how many dates they played for years in the smallest little venues, and were constantly on the road touring, and just didn't stop. And I just think, my God, I know I sound a bit like an old person now, but a lot of modern bands they do a bit of touring and they have to give up, whereas AC/DC just relocated from Australia and just toured Britain, America, and they still hadn't made it big for years before things started to work out for them, and then they lost their lead singer, but that's another story, isn't it, really?
That's right, yeah. It's the kind of the whole myth of the hard-working rock band, transit vans and crisps and beer and everything, and it's slogging away for months and years.
Yes, and then like I mentioned, I was definitely a bit young for the delights of punk, and also I lived in the countryside, so it was mostly Status Quo at my kind of environment. Really, they were the band that you definitely didn't say anything about the Quo unless you wanted to get beaten up. But when did punk sort of come onto your radar, and when did you get your first punk record or see the first punk gig?
Yeah, I think I first found out about it when I used to buy the music press, and I was reading something, I don't know, it was Sounds or Enemy or something, or Melody Maker, and it just talking about the Sex Pistols, and I thought, what's all this about? And then, actually, at the time, it's one of the last jobs I ever had. I was working in a a very staid, old-fashioned record shop, and I got some singles through there for staff prices. So I got like Sex Pistols, but what was more important to me was getting my first television single with Marquee Moon on sides A and B, and that really did it for me more than the Sex Pistols and stuff. It was like the New York sort of version of new wave or whatever was more exciting for me because of the guitars and the writing and everything. It was just it seemed way above. It was still rough and ready, but it was somewhere else.
Did that feature Robert Lloyd or?
No, but it was just. I think it was just after Robert Lloyd. Oh, sorry, I was thinking of Richard Hell. Yeah, it was Lloyd. Yes.
Yes, there you go.
Yes.
Because I didn't. Yes, I managed to do an interview with one of the kind of. I think. Well, I did an interview with someone called Lloyd, and then another person who was on the Blank Generation single.
It's Richard Lloyd, isn't it?
Richard.
And then there's Richard Hell, who was in the very first television. He played bass, I think.
Yes.
Richard Lloyd, a great guitarist. He didn't get enough credit. It was all went to Tom Verlaine, but Richard Lloyd was equally as important, I think.
Yes, absolutely. That was quite something at that point. And then, because I never made that leap between being a fan and being in a band. At that stage, had you sort of been kind of, playing guitar and sort of, finding confidence in your vocal at this point?
Not really. I never thought of being a singer, and I wasn't really seriously doing any band stuff. But when punk just happened, it kind of started inspiring myself and some friends to just maybe try something, where you wouldn't have thought of it before because you might not have been confident about playing. You could just do it because it was just, all you needed was a couple of chords. So I kind of started in a few different projects with various chums. And one day, it's like we were just like mucking around and somebody said, we've got to get some vocals. Somebody's got to do some voice stuff. And that night, what I did was I made a tape. I had a twin cassette player recorder in my bedroom. So I took the Gift by the Velvet Underground. And if you turn the stereo to the left, you get all the music with no voice.
Yeah.
So I recorded that. And then I did my own version of the song, John Cale's vocal. I did my own version in the other speaker, and I recorded it. So that was me, like doing a kind of spoken verse thing. And I played that to people, and they just didn't believe it was me. They said, "That's not you. You've just taped the record." Nobody believed it was me, and then that's how I got into doing vocals.
Right. And was this with your original kind of band? Was that TV Art?
No, it's quite a bit before that. It was just like a couple of chums from school. We were just mucking around. We never got serious about anything. It was just I tried doing a vocal for the first time, and they were the ones that heard it. That was all. A bit of confidence. I must have done it quite well, I thought.
Yes, absolutely. That was quite something. Then after that, did you? Yes. When did TV Art sort of appear in your life?
Probably not too long after that. I met Malcolm at a party one night when I was about 17, I think, and we'd been at school together, but we didn't really know each other at school. So we started talking about music, and by that point, some people were really up on what was happening with punk and everything, post-punk, new wave, and others just didn't want to know. So he did want to know, and he'd been listening to much the same records as me. So we started talking about all these things like television, the first Talking Heads album, some of the Pistols, Clash, everything. Just spent the whole night talking about it. But I found out that he just started playing guitar, so we agreed that we'd try playing guitar together a few days later and see how it went. So that's really how it all started. I went up to his parents' place in, I think it was Bruntsfield in Edinburgh, and Malcolm had a Rickenbacker guitar. He had a real guitar. I just had a cheap, really cheap semi-acoustic copy of it. So anyway, I showed him some Velvet songs that I'd worked out, and we just kind of clicked it off. And in a nutshell, that's how it all started, and then things just developed after that.
Yes. And was it quite a kind of a rapid kind of sort of story between TV Art and then, Josef K starting?
At the time, it wouldn't have seemed that way because, time went so slowly, but it was pretty rapid when you think about it now. And we started with TV Art, eventually pulling that name. We didn't. I don't think we ever really liked the name. It was just a name, and we basically started recording some demos. So we did a few demo tracks, and then things didn't really work out as it was. So we changed the lineup slightly, and then one late afternoon, we got a phone call from a music promoter in Edinburgh saying, "Adam and the Ants are playing tonight. The support band's pulled out. Can you play? Can you get ready in 2 hours?" So that was it. That's how it all happened. We decided we're going to have to change our name for tonight, so we somehow we came up with Josef K, and that was the first Josef K gig supporting Adam and the Ants.
Wow! And did that?
I was in Edinburgh.
And wow, that's amazing. Did that feature Marco Peroni on guitar as well?
Yeah, it was the whole shebang, and Adam was really nice. He chatted to us and everything, but we were very kind of scared because we hadn't played to an audience like his audience, and we thought we were just going to get annihilated, just gobbed on and bottled. Somehow we got away with it, and we went down pretty well. So it was like something you'd see in an early Beatles film, where the lads just get together just in time to play their first show, and they don't know anything about it.
God, that is incredible, actually. Yes, just to make that kind of come together so beautifully is quite.
Yeah, it really did. It kind of just changed everything. We weren't expecting it. We didn't think we'd get a decent support. We weren't even really looking, so it all just happened. We must have done something right, because we had played a few small gigs in Edinburgh, and there was things filtering through in some of the fanzines. So obviously the promoter must have thought of us because he'd either heard us or read about us. So we did have some right to do it, I guess, but we didn't expect it, and we were all very. I don't think that's time to think. It's just frantic.
Yes, and was your sort of first? Did you do demos first, or did you go and do the kind of your first release, which was kind of, is it Romance Chance Meeting? Was that the first kind of recording you put together?
Yeah, that was actually a demo, and it was just used as the first single. So we'd recorded that in Edinburgh quite a while beforehand. Probably in those times, it would have been a long time. Probably about 6 months or something. And when it came to put the first single out, Stephen Daly in Glasgow suggested we put those tracks out as a single. We hadn't really thought about it, so that's how that came about. So we hadn't actually recorded anything specially for the first single. It was only after that we started recording specifically.
Right, and with that release, that was on Absolute Record, the label, wasn't it?
Yes, Stephen Daly, and I think Edwin Collins might have been involved.
Yes.
And so that was the first single they put out, and again we didn't think it was that great, the record, but it was good getting a single out, and it did lead to some interviews that kind of paved the way for what was to come next. Like doing the first Sounds interview was such a massive thing. It seemed to just kick off the whole Scottish punk or post-punk scene. It all took off.
It did take off. And when did you first meet Alan, the famous Alan Horne? When did he sort of come into your orbit?
Probably around the time of speaking to Stephen Daly, or just afterwards. I think he would have been starting Postcard, and then he would have probably asked us to get involved in that. And then we did the second single, Radio Drill Time. We recorded the same afternoon as Orange Juice, the same day, sorry. So we were in the morning to do Radio Drill Time, and I think Orange Juice went in to be Falling and Laughing in the afternoon. So that's how tight the budget was, and we got two Postcard singles out of that day.
Yes,
pretty good.
That was amazing. So you recorded the album Sorry for Laughing, but then that doesn't appear, and then you go back and record the next album. I know I get a bit. It's an interesting. And the Only Fun in Town is the one that's recorded afterwards, but is released first. Is that right?
Yeah, it's all a bit of a mess. Yeah, we basically recorded an album for Postcard in the same studio that we'd done the Radio Drill Time and things, and it was going to be the first Postcard album, the only Postcard album. So after it was finished, it got pressed, it got mastered,
yes,
ready to go to pressing, and then we heard it, and it just didn't sound the same. It sounded like somebody had mixed out all the treble and top end, so it just sounded really, to us it sounded dull, and we just didn't like it. So we just decided we didn't want to put it out, and a few months later we were in Brussels, because we'd done a single for Crepuscule, Sorry for Laughing, that came out in Crepuscule Records in Belgium. So we went over to Belgium again to record the album again. So we got, I think Rough Trade were involved this time, we got some kind of budget together and spent a short time, really, it's maybe 5 days to record another album. It's basically much of the same tracks, but recorded more like a band performance. So it's a lot more rough and ready. So that's the kind of sound we wanted. We wanted to try and get across the live energy onto vinyl, whereas we felt the first album attempt had been a bit maybe disinfected. But
yes.
I think the opposite now. I think the first time we recorded an album is the best one.
It's kind of interesting because I know with the Smiths they had that first album which sounds a bit tinny, and then they had John Porter come and he got given sort of a little bit of cash to try and sort out the issue. But then when you heard that John Peel sessions or those BBC sessions that came out as Hatful of Hollow, the production, it makes so much difference. It's amazing how much that.
Absolutely. I've worked with him a few times as well, and I can't remember if he did the Josef K session, but he did one or two of my solo ones, and yeah, he was very good. But yeah, it's a massive difference, And then around that time, everyone sort of went pop, and everything. Everyone demanded that singles and records should be classy and have a veneer on them, and all the punk bands and post-punk bands all became pop bands, just about, that seemed to happen at the time, around 80, 81, 82.
Yes, well, it was kind of interesting, because I suppose at that point we'd had the 70s had been a politically weird period, then we had the sort of 79 Thatcher government, and then there was the Falkland War, and then miners' crisis, and the Greenham Common, and various other political things, and musically there was that little post-punk period, but then you had the goth world, and then you had the Blitz kids and new romantic stuff, and it all started to alter. And then Trevor Horne production that I think first appeared on a Dollar single,
that's right,
and then went on to be the sound of the early to mid 80s really, and a lot of people bought that kind of as this is the future, and MTV started to appear in videos, and.
The way you've just described it, it really did happen like that. There was so much change in direction, and it seemed to be constant, like things evolving, and all those different kind of movements. The Blitz and everything, and Bowie got tapped into that for Ashes to Ashes, didn't he? He got them all in his videos.
Yes, that's right. He went down and sort of got Steve Strange and about another 10 people to appear on the beach with him.
Never want to miss a chance at being trying out the latest thing.
Yes, well, Bowie he still was on the zeitgeist at that point, and then obviously his 80s period was quite interesting, and it was kind of interesting as an artist seeing how people then sometimes can slightly struggle. I mean, his kind of Let's Dance album was good, but then Tonight and Never Let Me Down were a little bit hit and miss. But then we had Tin Machine, so it was an interesting time with Mr. Bowie.
Bowie fared a lot better than just about all his contemporaries. He was still super hip because Ziggy had influenced punk rock, along with glam rock had influenced punk rock. You can hear it. Roxy music, if you listen to the guitars in the first one or two Roxy albums, it's proto-punk. It's Phil Manzanera's playing punk, basically.
Well, also, you've got to also, you don't have to, but one could include the Bay City Rollers and the Ramones. You know, like if you didn't have,
you could.
If you know that the start of the Rollers, and then you hear the start of the Ramones, you think, that's, you know, you wouldn't want to go to court on plagiarism, but there was quite a slightly similar quality, and you know the Rollers were there before the Ramones. So, hey,
true. And then you mentioned the Ramones. That I forgot to mention that would have been the first punk rock that Malcolm and I went. A punk rock gig Malcolm and I went to in Edinburgh. The Ramones were playing at Clouds, and it was famous for having a bouncy dance floor because I think it was all about to fall to bits. And we saw the Ramones. The first time I'd seen people pogoing and things, it was just amazing.
Because that was, so what year would have that been, the Ramones gig?
77 or 76. It's 77, I think.
Oh, that's fantastic, because I think Danny Fields was probably still their manager at that stage. I think he came over, and there's a nice little story, because I got the Lloyds mixed up a bit earlier, but there's that, I don't know if you've seen that film about the Nightingales, Robert Lloyd, called King Rocker, that features Stuart Lee, and yes.
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's another little classic on Sky Arts if you ever get a chance.
Right.
It's kind of interesting that that kind of period of early punk, and also the Nightingales and that kind
Stuart Lee, did you say?
Yeah, well, Stuart Lee is kind of narrating this film called King Rocker, talking about the world of the kind of Birmingham-based band, the Nightingales, if you remember them.
I do, but I didn't really hear much of what they did. But I remember I remember the name and everything.
Yeah, well, he went on to form Robert Lloyd, Vindaloo Records, that featured people like We've Got a Fuzzbox and We're Going to Use It, and those little bands. And then, you know, about 5 years ago, they made this film, and it was kind of driven a lot by Stuart Lee because of this connection with Birmingham and King Kong. They had this big statue of King Kong at the Bullring in Birmingham, and so the film centres a lot about that. It's kind of beautifully put together, and it's quite interesting for nerdy people like me, anyway. So, just to finish, there is a little bit about Robert Lloyd going to see the Ramones at that first tour, and this guy called Danny Fields, who was the manager, was also there, and he took he was their manager, and he also took some beautiful photographs, but he also worked with people like Jim Morrison, Nico and Iggy Pop, and he's got one of those kind of characters that is always attracted to quite extreme people, and things always end badly for him, but he tells a good story. So it's
right.
Sorry about that. That's 5 minutes of your life you'll never get back, actually.
No, that's okay. No, listen, I love all that stuff. That's Stuart Lee, the comedian. Is that right?
Yes. So he's
you know what? Why I mentioned him, because why I heard you mention him, and I thought, hang on, he's done the foreword to the new book about Josef K, and that's just. I thought, why did you pick Stuart Lee? But every time I say that, somebody mentions, he knows so much about music. I didn't know he was so involved.
Yes,
and I didn't. So when he was doing the foreword for the Josef K book, I thought, why? Because he tells a story in the opening book. The book's coming out this month, I think, and he says that I went to see him once at one of his early stand-up shows and heckled him. And I was shouting at him, saying things, "Do you know who I am?" And the thing was, it wasn't me. The bugger's written it in the first pages of the book, which really annoys me. He's obviously just made it up, or he's mistaken.
Right. So yes.
Did you know there was a? Did you know?
Yes, the book through the crack in the wall.
Yes. Yeah, I've just got a copy the other day. I've only read half of it. I can't bear to read the rest.
Well, I guess it must be very strange anyway, but it's kind of interesting because I didn't realise, because the strange thing with Stuart Lee is that he is really obsessed with music, and very kind of quite obscure music. So he does really know his thing, and he's he does a little record review in a magazine called The Idler, which I'm always interested, because he picks the most obscure bands that are releasing stuff, and because I became obsessed with John Peel, and I always like. I love John Peel sort of picking these kind of really interesting, but, bands that you've never heard of before, and often just, introduce me to the most amazing music. So, Yes, I don't.
Well, we'll let them off then.
We'll vaguely, yes, today. I know. I mean, that's so. So you've been accused of heckling Stuart Lee.
Yes.
I guess
it's a lie.
It's a lie. Okay, yes. Well,
I've got to tell you, I don't know if you've ever read this, but John Peel phoned my mum when I was in Josef K because John Peel was playing Josef K on his radio show, and we did a session, and we met him once, and I was so chuffed that he was still playing us that I wrote a nice letter to say thanks very much for supporting us and playing us. I never thought anything of it, and I put my details on it. And one evening I was out. I still lived at home at the time. I was out, and I came back. She says, "Oh, you missed John Peel on the phone." I said, "What?" She says, "Yeah, John Peel phoned. He was awfully nice. He said he was very moved by the nice letter that you wrote to him." And I thought, bloody hell.
That's lovely. I know.
Yeah, I thought it was really sweet. I mean, because he's such a major monster of a man. It's just what he did was amazing, and a lot of people, loved him to bits. So I was so chuffed that he got on board. It was because I was listening to his show before we didn't put out a record and never really thinking we'd ever be on it. So.
No, and there was a lovely story with the Soup Dragons where they wanted to do a session, and he gives them the money to literally go down to London, and then years later, is it Sean gives him the. Yes, he gives him the cash back, but John wouldn't take it, so he just hides it in the car. And then, and it's just like, God, that's amazing. He would have given the money for those kids to travel down from Scotland to London to do the session. Yeah. So, but a lot of them, a lot of people have got those stories where John just helped him out. Yeah. But obviously, playing the record and having a John Peel session is kind of the key thing to that. So then, So you got the two albums, but then, and now you like the first one. But anyway, so that was quite interesting. And then the band breaks. Was that kind of always on the card that you were only going to do one album and then do your Ziggy Stardust?
Well, Malcolm had said in our first interview with Dave McCulloch, I think it was Sounds, yeah. He said we were going to split up after one album, but we'd never said that. We'd said we'd probably split up after two albums. Between us, we said that. But Malcolm said one. So that kind of was obviously tempting fate or something. We hadn't really planned anything, but basically, as things transpired, it just, everything had lost its spark, and it just wasn't fun anymore. It's simple as that, and we kind of grew apart. So we were never people that just wanted to work at it just to get money. It was all about what it was about, It was all about having that Josef K thing, and if that was kind of evaporating, then what was the point?
Yes.
So I decided to leave. I didn't ask them to disband. I thought they could have carried on actually. So I said you can carry on. It's fine, but they didn't. Malcolm joined Orange Juice the same day, so that was it.
And off they went.
Yeah, that was it. And I kind of had been tampering with electronics and all sorts of weird stuff recording-wise. So I was kind of all set up to do new material and just, really have fun with the technology of the time. So I was kind of looking forward to that. But it took me a good few months to get over the whole thing because it was such a way of life,
Yes.
When you're in that kind of situation, you become part of such a, like the four against the world type thing, and you have to adapt.
Well, absolutely.
Lifestyle.
Well, also, there's the age, and if you think what a percentage part of that time was to when you're sort of in 20, it's quite large, isn't it? It's almost probably a quarter of your life has been in a band, because most bands have a 3 to 5 year narrative. They get together, they have 12 months making a sound, possibly get a single, John Peel plays it, then they get the John Peel session, get the first album, transit van around the country, and then the second album, a bit tricky, and then normally especially from the 80s scene, it seems to be 2 or 3 albums, and then that's the end. But then you have the most prolific solo career, which is quite boggling, isn't it? It's because it is very electronic. So once the band had finished, did you just literally pick up the baton and think, right, that's it, I'm going to go my own way, to paraphrase Fleetwood Mac? I just I had so many ideas, and ideas I don't think would have
fitted into Josef K anyway. It was just like, I just wanted to branch out into other things. I mean, I'd been making weird tapes in my bedroom at home for quite a while anyway. And basically what set me off properly was the first time the most famous drum machine in the world, the Roland 808, came into the UK, and it all became after that. Everyone used it. All the early original hip hop stuff in America, all the electronic stuff in the early days was all done with the 808. So I managed to, with some Josef K royalties, bag myself one of these machines, which was like, if you can imagine just the most amazing state-of-the-art computer now that does everything, that machine was it in 1980 or 81. So that enabled me to really get into the electronic music and start doing my own thing. And it was a great sense of freedom to be able to just experiment like that. And I was allowed to do it. I mean, first of all, with Crepuscule Records, they just put up budgets for me to go and record and things. And that's where we did Running Away as the first single, because Michelle at Crepuscule said, you know that song, Running Away? I said, yeah, it's great. He goes, you should cover it. I said, you're joking. I thought, me cover Running Away? You must be mad. So I tried it, and it kind of worked out in a kind of cute, quirky way.
Yes. And that was dear old Sly Stone, wasn't it? Really, which
yeah.
And that was quite amazing. So at this stage, did you sort of feel kind of rejuvenated in the 80s? Because you're becoming incredibly prolific at this point, and people like the writer Paul Morley kind of loves you, but then you start working with people like Billy Mackenzie and also the great Alan Rankin as well appears in your life. Did you feel kind of quite liberated when you'd kind of become a solo artist?
I think that's probably good, yeah. I think it was just the most liberating thing was just being able to do exactly what you wanted without having to be democratic about it. And just, if you got an idea, you just play it and that's it.
Yes.
And luckily enough, I could carry like all the parts of a song inside my head, like the bass line, the drum patterns, the guitars, the keyboards, and I transpose it. Even to my bad playing, I can still get the music out. So I was lucky. Sometimes I could just go into a studio, and if there was some machines around, I could make records. So simple as that. And because of the technology revolving at the time, you could start to do that more. You could do more by yourself. So that was that helped a lot as well.
Yeah, and your vocal range as well. It really matures during this period as well. For that.
Oh, I don't know. I think sometimes I look back and I think, my God, I was shouting. I was shouting far too much. Somewhere I confused emotion with belting it out.
Yes.
I cringe at some of my vocals. I've never really been comfortable singing, and I still. I mean, I hardly ever sing now, even though sometimes I have to. But I don't really like doing it. So I much prefer making music. Always have done.
Yes, but I think Bowie said that he used to try and write for other people to sing his songs, but then eventually gave up and had to become the singer. So and Jimi Hendrix never enjoyed singing. He used to hide away and not let anybody watch him when he was doing the vocal parts.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I mean, there's been times throughout the last 40 years or whatever that I've purposely tried to base albums around other singers and get other singers involved. And, everyone ends up saying to me, "Why don't you just sing it yourself?" And that's not the point. I want to be behind the scenes, producing it, not singing it. But anyway, I never get my way. But getting back to what you're saying about Rankin and Billy, that all came from the very early days in Scotland of all the bands like Associates, Josef K, Scars, Fire Engines. We all knew each other, and we all met around that time. I mean, I can't believe how much of a thing was going on when you think back to all those bands now.
Yes.
And at the time, people used to say, "Oh, I'd like to come up to Edinburgh or Glasgow to see the scene." And you think, "What scene? This is not a scene." Because you'd just be out with your buddies, or you'd be having a pint with Davy from the Fire Engines or something. You think nothing of it. But people outside, they actually thought, well, Edinburgh's where it's happening, or Glasgow. And we didn't realise it. It just seemed so bizarre. So to us, it was just, we're all just having fun. So, yeah, Billy, well, we used to play with associates sometimes, and Billy would always come backstage, and then Rankin. So you knew them from that time.
Yes.
But there was one bizarre time, though. Billy and Alan were on a Scottish late-night chat music show. I think it was hosted by B.A. Robertson.
Oh, yes.
And so they'd done one of their tracks off their album, and he was interviewed, a cringing interview afterwards, because they just didn't want to be there. They thought he was a plonker, and it's a very strange interview. Anyway, at one point, B.A. goes to Billy, goes, "So, Billy, who's your favourite singer then?" And he goes, "Paul Haig." And I was watching that, and I'll tell you, I've never been so shocked in my life. I couldn't believe he just said that.
Yes.
I was thinking, that can't be right. This is Billy Mackenzie saying this. He's the best singer in the world. And I'm thinking, what the heck? Couldn't believe it. I mean, it didn't go in my head. I was just I was far too much in shock to let it.
Yes. Well, it's probably quite
funny, though. It was really funny.
So when you came to the second album, I think there was a lot you did. The Warp of Pure Fun. This is the one that was produced by, was that Alan Rankin was kind of the main producer of this collection?
No, it was me and Alan Rankin. Alan Rankin always got the credit because he'd been in the Associates, and his girlfriend pushed it that way. But sometimes he wasn't even there when I was mixing the song. So it's produced by myself and Alan Rankin. But, there's no point telling people anymore. It doesn't matter, because everyone will just say Alan Rankin produced that, because she put that on some of the posters. Anyway, you have to live with these things.
Yes.
But I must say, though, it was fantastic working with Alan, because he would have some amazing ideas. But, I mean, I was always in the studio more because I was doing all the drum programming, sequencing, and Alan didn't get involved in all that. So I did spend an awful lot of time by myself working away. So, but he would pop in with some great ideas and say, "Look, what about this string part?" And he added a hell of a lot. And yeah, we co-produced it, but sometimes he wasn't there. So
yes.
I'll leave it at that.
That's I know.
But I'm not taking anything off him. I'm not bad mouthing him. He was fantastic. It's just that it was a co-production. That's all.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there's been quite a few occasions where there's been a named person, but everyone said, well, I think Martin Hannett was one of those people in his life where he said, well, Martin wasn't really there. He might have been laying down under the console drunk, and his name says Martin Hannett on the production, but and there was another. Yeah, there's been a few of those occasions, but you just have to shrug your shoulder. When did you? Of course. Yes, it's just one of those. When did you do the album? God, and I don't see. I'm a bit swinging 82. When did this come out?
It didn't come out for a long time because I absolutely hated it, and it was put on the shelf. But then James Nice, LTM, and now Crepuscule, relaunched Crepuscule, he eventually persuaded me. He said it was an important thing to release. He would say that. So eventually I just gave in to his constant heckling.
Nagging. Probably nagged, didn't he? So when did you go in the studio and record that? Was that...
believe it or not, it would have been 1982, and I think it was when I was actually living in Brussels. I think it was 81 or 82. I was living in Brussels. I was invited over to live there and work, and that's probably where I did a lot of the early production stuff, like Running Away and other tracks. So I lived in Brussels, 6 months, and did an awful lot of work. So we would have done it around that time. And basically just got some jazz musicians together and gave them the list of songs, and they rehearsed it, and I went in and
you put it down.
I don't know what I did in it. I did something on it, and it was bizarre because these guys were proper jazz people, and I was just some little white thin kid from Scotland, and it was so funny because it was just like the drummer was actually, I think he was in his 60s at that point, and he played with Sinatra in some of his touring bands, so he'd seen it all, and he must have thought, who's this joker? This is ridiculous.
Yes,
But anyway.
you probably would have appreciated it more now than you did at the time, actually. But I think it was Brussels or Bruges that saved Marvin Gaye for a while. Actually, I think he relocated there when he had a lot of problems in America with his personal life.
I used to record in the studio that he used, Studio Catty. It was haunted, and I went to record there one night in the maybe about 86 or 87, and had a terrible night because there was some kind of apparition in the room. And I went down the next day and I said to the engineer, "Look, I can't stay here another night. There's something up there." He goes, "Oh, no, people see ghosts." He was cool about it. So I didn't stay there. I was recording there for about a week, and I just got a hotel in the actual city and just commuted every day because honestly, it spooked me out completely. But that's where Sexual Healing was recorded, yeah, and it was kind of in the middle of a kind of wood in the Belgian countryside. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, it probably made a lot of weird noises at night, didn't it? Creaking.
Yeah.
It's not good. How did you, with the generally with the 80s, it was an interesting period, 83 to 87, there was the Smiths, lots of indie pop, and then you had, then sort of 87, that period where, a lot of those bands broke up, and then Ecstasy came along, and then there was a whole dance scene. How did you sort of navigate your own sort of creative journey during that period, as we got towards the late 80s?
I suppose I probably went through a slight lull at some point for a couple of years, and after the Crepuscule, and then I kind of got things round and back again towards the 87 to 88. I recorded my next album, which went to Circa Records. It was called Chain.
Yes.
At the end of the 80s, I was kind of doing that. I actually recorded it around about 88, and it came out in 89. So Rankin and I worked on that again, of course. So that was an exciting time. Signing to, well, basically it was, I think it was Virgin Records, really, Circa through Virgin. So that was another solo deal, which I was quite surprised at. But strangely enough, it was the same A&R people that signed me to Island Records, so maybe not a big surprise.
No, but then, there's some massive songs on there, aren't there? Something Good, the opening track especially, is a...
It hurts, because if I had £1 for every time someone said, "Why was that track not a hit?" I would be so rich. I remember I was in New York recording what was meant to be the second album for Circa at that time. So Something Good was out as a single, and Ray from Circa phoned me up one morning in the New York hotel bedroom I was in, and he says, Something Good made it to the last 3 for the new Levi adverts. And he said, we're on the short list. And I thought, oh, wow. Because this was completely out of the blue. Because how many songs... at that time, the Levi ads were just huge, weren't they?
Massive, yes. There was
massive. So there's me, half asleep, thinking, "Oh, Levi ad, wow!" And then, of course, it didn't make it to the advert, but things would have been a bit different, I think.
Yeah, God, this does happen. Well, are you pleased with that album, though? Apart from that sort of disappointment that it wasn't the big hit.
Yeah, when it came out, there was Circa were quite a small label, and they had their priorities all mapped out. So I was kind of Billy Mackenzie eventually signed to Circa, and he said to me one day, he says, "Paul, you and I are just baubles on their Christmas tree." And he was totally right. So what they had at the time, they had Nena Cherry, they had Hue and Cry, Massive Attack, all breaking through. So they didn't have time to devote to me. So what they did was they got a very untrustworthy plugger to work on my album, and he just screwed it up, and it just fucked the whole thing up. So that's how it all fell through. And I had a tour and everything. I went out to tour it. Malcolm, Josef K was in the band. God, it's quite a few people. The guy out of Primal Scream was drumming, and we played, and the album hadn't come out. They didn't manage to get the album out in time for the tour. So we were going around playing these songs that nobody'd even heard, and it's just a disaster.
God, that's a bit Spinal Tap, isn't it?
Yeah. So that kind of stuff seemed to always happen to me. But I'm not bitter. I don't live with regrets, because I really don't care about that. It's just the fact if it could have been better, it would have been nice because it was all in place.
Yes.
It was all in place, but it didn't work out. But I was pleased with that album at the time. Yeah, I think for the time it fitted in. I mean, it's not something I'd listen to now, but I think we did a pretty good job. It was just really Alan and I and one or two other session musicians, but it worked out good because I was self-financed, and then I sold it to Circa. So I took a bit of a gamble. I think I'd moved house at the time, and I had a bit of money, so I put a lot of it into the album.
Oh God, that's quite clever, isn't it? Yeah, well.
Yeah, because I'd written a lot of tracks, and Alan came around one day, and we just listened to the songs and decided that there was a decent album's worth of songs there. So that we decided to go for it and produce it.
Yeah, and did you then work with Curtis Mantronic at this point, or that kind of time?
It's so funny talking about all this. It's like I'm someone else. This is all such a. You forget about things. You forget. You don't think about things you've done. So it's kind of funny. That came about because it was time to do the second album on Circa, and this time it was an in-house album, so they'd be putting up the budget, and
yes.
I was to make a much more expensive album, so we were thinking about producers. At that point, I suggested Mantronics, and I remember them saying, nah, what's he ever done? And then a few weeks later, he was on Top of the Pops, Mantronics, with having a number 6 single or something.
Yes, there was.
To Have Your Love, and they phoned me back up. The cheeks phoned me back up the next day and say, Paul, we've got a really good. Why don't you work with Mantronics?
Excellent.
This is what happens in the music business. It is as bad as that. That thing happens. It's not a joke. So yeah, so that's basically that. We decided to go over there, and then also at the time, Lil Lewis had just had French Kiss, so ended up working with the pair of them, which was bizarre. They both hated each other, by the way, in fierce competition.
Yes, I would imagine, because I went to that was it UK Fresh kind of event that took place in about '86 at Wembley Arena, and I think it featured Mantronics, because I was, being obsessed with John Peel. I thought, oh yes, I'm going to listen to all those Street Sound compilations, and because it was and it was kind of just new music and new sounds, and it was just very exciting. So I loved a couple of those 12-inch singles by Mantronics. There was a kind of nice groove. So I could imagine if you were also into your electronics and interest in technology, it would have sounded fantastic. I seem to remember they used to rhyme the word ladies with Mercedes quite a lot in some of their early singles, but some of the lyrics weren't great, I have to say, but we liked it, us pasty-faced white boys. But it was quite... So did that album come out then?
It came out eventually on Crepuscule, titled Coincidence versus Fate. It surfaced years and years later, because I think we were allowed to use the tapes, so Crepuscule put it out under a different title. It didn't come out at the time because the deal fell through. Strangely enough, it fell through after I was congratulated by Circa on having my first dance hit record. I had a track out called Flight X, and it was doing really well in clubs, and the Boiler House remixed it at the time, and it was like in all the charts. So they said, that's right, it's brilliant. And then they decided they didn't want to do an album, because the A&R guy turned around to me halfway through and he says, why didn't you just make another rock album like the last one? He wasn't too happy about all these dance and electronic stuff. I wanted to do something different, just being that way. I just thought, I don't really want to make another Chain album. I'd like to do something a bit more up to date, work with people like Mantronics and get everything shiny and sounding good. And have producers as well, instead of media and all. So I was quite into that, but I think as it went on, they kind of lost faith in it.
Yes, blimey. God, could you imagine what they thought when David Bowie presented them with Low? They would have been freaked out, wouldn't they? Decades later, they would say it was their favourite Bowie album, but at the time they would have wept, wouldn't they, little buggers?
It was so funny, because everyone wanted to work with Mantronics at that time. When I was in the studio, Misha Paris came in, there was Cindy Crawford, and then at one point somebody says, hey Curtis, you know, you and Paul share the same birthday, so September 4th. And he didn't really speak much to me. At that point, he just turned around and says, "Yo, Paul, my Zodiac brother."
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
I did sort of Google what happened to Mantronics. It's quite. I mean, Curtis is doing quite well. I know a few years ago he was doing some dates and. Yes,
I was wondering. I'd actually thought about him recently, and I thought, what's he up to now? Because I've not kept up with what he's doing or anything. So is he still?
It was kind of an interesting interview because I remember him being really bitter about the record industry, just like, you know, how ripped off he was, and that's it was one of those things he hadn't let go of at all. I think he just felt like the whole thing had sort of done him over, really. But a lot of artists, but he he's still part of that. The guy who started Street Sounds, he seemed to still have a connection with that guy. Morgan Khan, that was his name, who did these kind of compilations that we bought in the 80s. And there was some connection because I remember phoning the number and getting Morgan Khan, who passed me over to Curtis, and he talked about his dates that he was doing. So he was doing some club dates, but I don't know. I think they were in South Africa or somewhere, but I might be making that up now. But anyway, he's there, and I think his partner, I Googled him, and it was not good, the vocalist, but that's another story, isn't it?
Right.
You'll have to look on Wikipedia on that one and go, oh yes, that's not good. But then your 90s, the John Major years, as we call them, before Team Tony, you get into soundtracks, cinematic soundtracks, don't you? What this is a massive change, isn't it, of musical direction at this stage?
I suppose it would seem that way. As usual, it's just me knocking around with stuff, and I don't know. I just kind of flow into something else. I don't really think about it too much. It seemed like I was kind of always interested in soundtrack stuff, and I thought maybe some of that had come through in the past. But this time I thought, great, I'll just not sing at all. So I collected quite a few DAT tapes full of instrumentals and things, and then I put some stuff together. And James Nice, at that point, it would have been with Temp Modern he put out on, I think. Yeah, he just heard it, and he loved all that stuff. He said, why don't you put out an album of that stuff? And I thought, great. So kind of got a slight concept together of having 3 suites and then 3 stories in the booklet, just to sort of gel things together. And I did all that on an 8-track in my house, so it's not it's not high tech at all, but I think some of it worked out okay for what it was at the time.
Yes, and did you focus on that before coming back? Was it 2007 you brought out a very electronic album, didn't you? Electronic Nick Audience.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, this is total memory lane. It's so funny. Yeah, I think I did a couple of other cinematiques, but I don't know if they came out beforehand or afterwards. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else I did in that period. I did a lot of writing over the years. Some of it didn't see the light of day. I've still got 1 or 2 things lying around I might look at one day. But basically, I kind of relaunched the Rhythm of Life thing at some point, and then I thought, let's try doing a new album with vocals for a change. Not full of vocals, but more than usual. So Electronic Audience, that was kind of me starting out with new technology at the time, because I hadn't really worked with computers. I'd always kind of used analog tape. So that was quite a learning curve. And that's basically, I think, 3 or 4 albums I did around that time, and quite a burst. I think there was even actually almost 1 album a year, which is uncommon for me.
It was very prolific, actually, because there was a bit of a jump then. The Wood, which is a very abstract album, isn't it? Because it's kind of an extraordinary piece of work. So how did that develop, The Wood? Because that came out probably 5-6 years ago, possibly longer.
Yeah, it's getting on now. I'm really having to get a new one sorted out. I've got plenty of ideas, but I must get into it more.
Did you? Because listening to it, it sounds like you had a great time exploring some completely new concepts here.
Oh, definitely. I loved it. It was laborious and really hard work to kind of gel all that together. But I would never have been 100% happy with it, but I was happy at the end knowing that if I didn't stop, I would have gone mad. So I had to let it go. And it's not perfect for me in any way, but that's just about with every album you get that.
Well,
but
I would imagine.
Really, what happened before was, like, I think it was 5 years before that, I'd put out an album called Cube, and that was pretty out there as well. It was another angle of new technology, very sample-based. So The Wood was basically me doing it again, but far more involved and more organic.
Yes.
So I played more on it. I used more organic sounds, field recordings, all that sort of found sound stuff. And I was really pleased with how that turned out. I love doing all that. Just some sounds that you just might never hear until you've heard it 6 times or something. I like the idea of that. And so The Wood was hours and hours and months of editing. So difficult. Sometimes I'd have like 15-minute pieces of music, trying to get them down to 4 minutes and things, and painstakingly going through each sound. But eventually it got done, and it came out in vinyl, which I was very pleased about.
Yes. And did you work with other people on that album?
No.
It was all yours. God.
Yeah, a complete madman. It's my mad album, I think. It took a long time, and at some points it was close to being bonkers.
Yeah, but it was kind of interesting because I know I've seen 1 or 2 of these documentary films about old Arcadia in Great Britain and the kind of ancient landscape. And, listening to that album, there was kind of like music that I thought, God, this would go really well on some of those films when they look at stone circles or ancient woodlands and stuff like that. So that's why...
That's great. Yeah, that's if that's what you thought, that's great, because that's the kind of thing I was going for. That's what I would love as well, just hearing that type of music and watching stuff like that,
Yeah, and did you?
I mean, I've heard of people going on taking that out on walks with them. They just listen to that and go. I mean, you've got walks on the album. You can hear movement going through forests and things. So it's great if somebody takes it out and plays it as they're walking, I think.
Well, yeah, that would be fantastic. So did that sort of take you about 2 years from sort of the idea to eventually completing it? Was it that kind of project?
I kind of didn't know at first what it was going to be. Like, usually I'd just collect music. I come back to the computer after 3 months and I think, did I record that? Because there's stuff there that I can't even remember doing. It's like I just sometimes go into some kind of trance and just come out with stuff and then forget about it. So basically I'd recorded a lot of stuff and started to put it together. And as it came together, I realised more and more how it was going to form up and tried to give it some kind of theme. So it all took a few years to do all of that,
Yes. So then how did you navigate the kind of lockdown period and then, working on whatever projects you're doing at the moment?
I've just been writing an awful lot. I've been getting a lot of vintage guitars, and each time I try a different one, I come up with a new riff or a new song straight away, because it's just so inspiring trying some of these older guitars. And I've just got hundreds of snippets saved in the cloud of new ideas. So it's going to be a case of going through them and picking out the best ones and then putting it all together. But it'll be more guitar-based, but also analog synths. So I'm trying to get a good balance between old-school synths, guitars, and I don't know what else, whatever else comes along.
And sort of vocal? Will you be sort of...
I'm going to try and add some vocals. The thing is, I think you reach a point where there's no point saying anything unless it makes sense or you want to say it. And I don't necessarily want to say... I don't want to write like I was when I was 20 or 25, because that just wouldn't feel right. I'm more into just trying to condense words and phrases now into just 1 or 2 lines that mean something, and I think I'll go more along that route. Because on the words, there's a few lines of vocals here and there, and I like them because they're simple and they're not saying much at all, but they're saying enough to make you think.
Yes.
I don't know if any of that makes any sense.
Well, it must be. I mean, there was a bit of a debate recently. I mean, I think we spoke about it at the beginning, didn't we? Taylor Swift about cats. Anyway, it's not really about cats, but it's the fact that some people, kind of my age, get quite upset about younger bands and younger artists. And I kind of think, look, if you're in your 60s, listen to pop music made by 16, 17-year-olds is not really aimed for us, is it? It's like, so you need to learn that actually we're the old people and we should just not kind of get too upset about Taylor Swift or Billie Eilish or anybody, because it's a bit embarrassing because we've got other problems, concerns and focus in our lives. And when you're 16, it's very different. But what to sing about? I mean, Black Star by Bowie is obviously like, oh my God, what an album. But then he did have a lot to think about. I mean, do you also have those challenges sometimes, thinking what's relevant, what isn't just a cliche, what's kind of, Bowie did a lot of, I think, kind of abstract kind of realism sometimes. He did certain phrases.
I think he was drawing a lot from his ferocious appetite for reading. I'm sure a lot of the time things were coming from the books he was reading too. He was always reading. Also, the fact is, on the next day, he was 63 or something when he made that. I think, was he?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I was thinking, what was Bowie singing about when he was my age? And he was out dancing in space, wasn't he? He was dancing out in space. So you maybe shouldn't have to be too careful about what you say. But I agree with what you're saying. I think in a way you've got to watch what you say. Really, you don't want to come across as trying to act young or anything. You don't want to. You just got to be careful, I think.
Do you then yourself? Do you sort of work with your dreams or things that you write? Are you conscious of what you're writing? Reading could be fed back into the work that you're trying to make at the moment?
I mean, I get a lot of inspiration from just thinking and looking at things. It's life itself is odd. It's really bizarre. So there's plenty stuff going on there in life. You don't have to go anywhere else, and you can sit there and go anywhere in your head, But with me, it's always usually coming from music first, and I get atmospheres through playing a few notes on the guitar that can spur on a whole song. So it can dictate vocals, arrangements, everything. It all depends the mood. It's about the moods, I think, for me more than anything.
Yes.
And the mood of a musical piece can easily take me in a direction vocally. But I find nowadays, in the last many years, I find it difficult writing because it's what to put in and leave out. I can write down a page of words and I think, I've got to condense this, and I keep condensing it. I don't want to add too much. I want to try and just get what makes sense and be very frugal. I think I was, when I listened to things like Low and The Idiot when I was that age, we all did hear it. I was very interested in the kind of the lyrical aspect of Bowie's writing and Iggy Pop stuff, where they seem to be using less lyrically, less vocals, less lines. There wasn't huge amounts of. They weren't wordy songs, were they?
No, they weren't.
Always crashing in the same car. Be My Wife. They're very, very simple lyrically, aren't they? And I was always impressed by that.
I did. Yes, Be My Wife. The opening line. Sometimes you get. Sometimes you get so lonely. Sometimes you get nowhere. Yes, I know. They're. Yes, he must have been very happy when he wrote that line. It was a good one. But also there was those other films that, I don't know if you watched many films, but like Paris, Texas or Betty Blue, those soundtracks are so evocative of that kind of, the desert landscapes with these very spacious kind of musical moments.
I had the Betty Blue soundtrack. I used to just play that to death. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I love the Wicker Man soundtrack. I think that's fantastic.
Yes. And do you also, you know, you were talking about your interest in sort of instruments. Do you also find yourself sort of delving into other periods of music as well, kind of early music or choral music or any other types that? Because I was just thinking with the wood, it kind of brought back a certain, or brought a kind of pagan vibe to listening to that, and I just wondered if some of those kind of early records, like Talus or anybody like that, would sort of kind of creep into your sort of thoughts.
Absolutely. Absolutely, all that stuff, everything you said. I mean, I'll listen to anything. I don't care what it is or what it's meant to be. This could be anything, absolutely anything. And also, just thinking about that, I was probably thinking a lot about some of the old folky English, British horror films I would see when I was growing up. You know, spooky atmospheres and things like that. Anything pagan and you know, it's that atmosphere, and just a banging of the drum or a whistle or something, rustling of the trees, all that stuff.
Yes,
I love all that.
I think there's a TV channel now, isn't there? One of these ones that keep bringing out these old classic kind of films and BBC films, and you know, there's always people, old men in landscapes looking very lost and confused by a railway line and water, and it is just all about suspense. It's very strange. It's a bit staged, but at the same time, when you're young watching those things, it's very creepy. And yes,
it certainly is. I've also kind of been working a lot. Well, I've not been releasing anything the last few years, but I've been recording the odd snippet of like drone synthesizers. I'm quite heavily into drone music, and I have to find a way of combining that without getting too boring, without it becoming a drone album. I want to try and combine it with more musical stuff. So it's not to the forefront, but I definitely want to have some of that going on, because I've been collecting, you know, just funny wee synthesizers that only make one sound, or you twiddle knobs and you get another sound. Hands-on things that aren't very advanced in a technological sense, but they're interesting in the mistakes that can come out and the crackly noises they make. So I'm kind of I've got a table full of them in my little studio. So I see some things on like Etsy or some website, and it's like. A tiny little synth that makes clapping noises, or another one that makes some kind of washing machine sound. I don't care. I kind of want to collect them all and put them all together and have a cacophony of weird noises.
Yes. Do you? Because you know, I mentioned I've done a lot of interviews with these 80s bands. A lot of people seem to end up living in around the Joshua Tree in America. I think it's because it's very cheap and it's not near anybody else, so they feel a little bit happier. But they're still making music. It's kind of interesting. But there's something about landscape, and also in that particular world, there's a place that do gong baths. And do you get kind of interested in those kind of slightly outer world kind of ideas and thoughts, especially the night sky and the Milky Way? Do things like that resonate with you?
Oh yeah, I think I watched a snippet of a video on gong baths last week. That's a thing, isn't it? Yeah, I love all that stuff. I mean, I love the night sky and everything. I live in kind of the countryside now. I left the big city of Edinburgh about a year and a half ago, and I moved to Peebles. So I'm kind of in a much more bucolic country setting, and I really like it. I've always wanted to live in the countryside. I didn't think I'd be doing it now, but I'm kind of getting towards that. I might go even further.
Yes, well, absolutely.
into the wilderness, because I love all that stuff, but it all depends on... you have to be in the right frame of mind to become even more isolated. So maybe it's nice to just have a happy balance at the moment. I think because I can walk along the river. It's just over the road, and there's trees everywhere, and there's no smog and there's no horrible road rage.
There's no road. I know road rage is quite. I think as we get older, and I think having to slightly accept and embrace it, is that one doesn't want to feel kind of hassled or kind of. You just need, the threat.
Just don't want any hassle. You're old enough to say to yourself, I want some treats. I want some peace. I want some clarity and not have any hassles. But of course, it's not going to happen like that. But I've got a hut in the back garden where I'm doing all this music. Not enough because I'm too busy with these guitars, but that's where I plan to make the next lot of music. And it's just in a leafy little garden, so it's kind of nice.
Yes. Well, you wouldn't.
I've never had something that separate before. I've always had something cluttering up a house, but this time it's in a garden. So
you can feel like you're going.
I might sample some wood pigeons.
Well, absolutely, and there's a lot of wood pigeons and magpies in this area. So
yeah, but you know what? It's not going to be a folky country wood pigeon album. It's going to be weird and interesting and have some killer riffs on it. So it will make sense in the end.
It will. And are you on a label, or do you have that potential to be on a label for any future releases?
And I've not really been on a label for a long time. I mean, I can put out an album on my own label, but it's so tiny. And also, the Riot's Crepuscule. I mean, the wood came out, so I can possibly do another one on Crepuscule. So no, there's outlets, yeah.
Excellent.
But no, there's nothing full of money and promotion. There's no big mega deals on the horizon. No. I'd love to be. I love labels like Ninja Records and Warp. I love all that stuff.
Yes,
but it's just how do you get to speak to anyone there? I don't know. And I mean, Eno's put stuff out in Warp, doesn't he? And there's other older artists. But I just don't think. I think my mistrust of the music business is probably too far gone now. And it's maybe just nice to be able to do your own thing.
Yes.
Still.
And have you managed to archive all your work and get? I know you've got a Bandcamp page, but do you have it kind of nicely put together, or is there still bits that aren't very well sort of found? Well,
there's been so many different labels and things, it's really impossible to get it all together. The Bandcamp is really just for the Rhythm of Life stuff that came out, and then there's an index on the Crepuscule website of my work on Crepuscule. Then there was stuff on Circa. It's all over the shop.
Yes, I know, it's tricky, isn't it, really?
And I've changed kind of direction so many times. I mean, it's very difficult to kind of explain to someone that's into Josef K that the synthesizer stuff as well, because it's so different. It's like having two heads. It's kind of hard to meld the two together in any shape. It's like they seem so different.
Yes, I know. One's classic indie and one's quite electronic. So it's
one's like walking in a wood.
Yeah, I don't know. I think as time goes on, though, people start to reappraise artists and musicians and bands, and start to appreciate, give things a bit more time, and not worry like, is this going to be a hit single or is this a hit album? It's like, well, just discovering something from 30, 40 years ago. It's surprising, how many things there's been films about the most obscure bands and books as well, and there's there's now a museum in Las Vegas, the punk museum. So people are getting kind of interested in archiving it, and I think discovering it. And Cherry Red Records are always bringing out these compilations at the moment, which are nicely compiled, and the most obscure stuff, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah. They reissued Chain many years ago, and also the Fire Engines is just coming out, isn't it? On Cherry, I think they've got something on Cherry Red, and there's a reissue of the stuff they did on Pop Oral, I think.
Right. Yes. Well, they probably are, because I'm always doing interviews with people who also compiling these collections, and like dream pop, cold wave, dark wave. It's like, well, there's so many scenes. It's all a bit goth and shoegazy, but there's like subsections in that as well. So, yes, it's interesting, but it's good that I suppose having a book on Josef K is going to also introduce people to to the band again, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very strange thing, but it's. I mean, I read about half of it, and I thought it was a good book to read. I mean, I love reading biographies and things, and I've read a lot of musical ones, and it's great to read the story, and also to evoke the time pretty well, and all the fact that there was so many good bands around as well. I'd kind of forgotten about how much was going on. So yeah, but I didn't want to get into the stressful part towards the end. I just thought I don't want to get stressed out.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like watching a film like The Titanic or there was one of my favourite films, Something Wild, and the first half is lovely, and then the second half it all gets a bit dark, and I think I'll just leave it there with Jeff Daniels being quite sweet and everything going well. But yes, it's just one of those things.
I went to see that film. I loved that when I saw it. I haven't seen it since. It was a good film. There's a film I really want to see coming out, In a Violent Nature. That's a kind of indie folk horror bloodfest. I love horror films, but it's actually apparently really beautifully filmed. So it's a kind of a different sort of tilt to the genre. It's like arty in a good way and still horrific. still tacky blood and horror, but it's kind of sounds like it's been shot beautifully. So I think it's going to be interesting if you like that type.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yes, it has to be done, doesn't it? It'll be quite good. As long as no animals are hurt, I'm okay.
Oh, absolutely. I'm definitely pro animals. I can't stand animal cruelty, honestly.
No, and if someone tells me, just warn you, this cat or dog dies, it's like, I'm not watching it. I just can't do that. I think it was because I grew up watching Lassie films and that sort of, but then being I suppose a vegetarian woke kind of person, it just like I'm far too sensitive for these kind of things, And
yeah, I hate it when you see like if you see like a horror film or any film, drama, whatever, and you see there's a cute pet in it, you think, oh, the pet's going to get it. At some point, the pet's going to get it.
Yeah.
And usually it happens, and I hate it.
No, I can't. I just think, no. They said, well, it's not too bad. You just have to just close your eyes. It's like, no, it's too upsetting, I don't know. With cats, I mean, I don't know if you had many cats in your life, but, you have such an intense bond with these animals that...
Oh, God, yeah. It's scary, in fact. My mother always used to say she thought they were telepathic and they know so much. And every cat, I mean, I've had my cat just now for 11 years. She's 13 now. So, but even now, the older she gets and the more, it becomes more intense. I mean, it's almost like you are communicating at a deep level. It's just, we've become even more bonded. It's kind of weird.
It is. I know they have, and the routine is so amazing. And unlike any friends and family, you never fall out, do you? You never say we need to have a few months space. Perhaps we'll catch up at Christmas. I don't know, or the following year.
I said to my cat the other day, I speak to her, and I said, I pet you every day, I feed you every day, I see you every day, we talk every day, you moan every day, and I still come back for more, and it never gets boring.
No, that's absolutely right. But I like the fact that one negotiates with the cat. Like I had to sort of go and lay down on the bed, and it's like, can I just nudge you slightly to one side? And it's like, and I knew that if it was too much, it would get up and walk away, and then I'd feel guilty. So I sort of, it's quite nice. It's
the guilt trips are terrible, aren't they? I mean, they just know how to push your buttons. They really, honestly do. I'm sure of it.
Yes,
I'm sure they can wind you up on purpose.
This is true. Well, look, Paul, thank you ever so much for your time. This has been quite amazing.
No worries. I'm completely sick of talking about myself, so that'll do me for a good long time now.
Yeah, this is true. But look, thank you for your time. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate it. It was amazing that to get to.
No, it's been great, and it was good talking about some of that stuff. Especially, I like the fact that you appreciate some of that kind of pagan filmy music stuff.
Yeah, it was been really fantastic listening to the solo albums and being kind of very curious and interested how it all kind of evolved and changed over those years. Thinking, God, there's a lot going on here. Actually, there's a lot of changes.
Well, I must get back and do more. Honestly, it's been far too long. So I'll try and get something new out soon. So will you let me know when
Yes,
you've written up something.
I will, and I can always send you a link, and then you can use it elsewhere. But that's been amazing. Thank you ever so much, and yes, for your patience as well for the beginning. Okay, well, look,
great. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And that, dear listener, is obviously the end of the interview. Massive thank you to Paul for giving me the time for that interview. If you want to know any more information about Josef K and Paul Haig, he has got a very good website and various other bits and pieces, which does include Bandcamp, Spotify, YouTube, and lots of other bits and pieces as well. So do check that out. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 show. And all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.